sources have shown they are not impartial. They are biased. They are responsible for what is happening in Côte d'Ivoire. They have been arming and transporting rebels.
Conditions continue to worsen for civilians as the violence spirals. At least 200,000 people have been displaced, particularly from Abidjan, according to the United Nations. More than 360 people have also died since November. It's a toll that's bound to rise even higher if the current political crisis continues. Mohamed Ado, AlJazeera, Abidjan.
Well, as the battle for Libya rages on, the fighting has pushed oil prices to their highest price in more than 2 years. And coming up, we'll look at how the uprising might affect the global economy. And telling his side of the story, Al Jazeera speaks to Malaysia's opposition leader Anwar Ibrahim as he continues to fight sodomy charges.
It was a revolution which ended half a century of autocratic rule and inspired a wave of public protest that swept across the Arab world.
Internet, Facebook, Twitter, they were not the revolution.
In an exclusive two-part documentary, Raghi Omar traces the roots and repercussions of this uprising and examines why 23 years of dictatorship fell in only 28 days. The Death of Fear, at this time on Al Jazeera.
A reminder of our top story on Al Jazeera. Libya's opposition council says it's considering an offer from Colonel Muammar Gaddafi that he step down if he can and avoid prosecution and keeping his assets. Meanwhile, Gaddafi's forces are on the attack in Libya's rebel-held towns. Battles are ongoing in Zawiya and in Ras Lanouf. Witnesses say residents are fleeing as the town is shelled. Britain and France are pushing ahead with plans for a UN-backed no-fly zone over Libya. But China has said Libya's sovereignty must be respected, suggesting it would veto a resolution. Well, the unrest in Libya has pushed oil prices to their highest levels for more than 2 years. There are concerns the rising costs could stop a global economic recovery. Al Jazeera's Rosalind Jordan explains.
On the world oil markets, prices have been moving in just one direction, up. In New York, above $105 a barrel. In Europe, reaching $115, a nearly 20% rise since the beginning of the year. Libya is not the biggest oil producer by any means, but it's significant, and lower output from there does raise prices. But that's not the only thing at play. Oil is one of the most actively traded commodities in the world. Whole companies exist to profit on price changes.
There's a tremendous amount of intraday profit taking in this market. I mean, you're getting $2, $3 a pop on crude oil. And so it's not all them, it's a lot of speculators in here just, driving the price up.
But while traders profit, consumers in the U.S. and elsewhere pay more for fuel. That means less money for clothing and food. And with their fuel bills on the rise, companies are charging more for those goods. Then there's the impact on the economic recovery.
Cutting back now in the United States, both on consumer demand and on investment demand, in the sense that these are factories and companies we're talking about, company demand, will slow down the recovery.
Thus, the reasons for the growing pressure on President Barack Obama to sell some of the nearly 800 million barrels held in government reserve, to assure people the political upheaval across the Middle East won't affect them.
The issue here is disruption. Is there a major disruption in the flow of oil? That's obviously a factor.
Other reasons why oil is expensive: increasing demand from China and India. But perhaps the single biggest factor affecting prices is fear. Fear that the prices will keep going up, and fear the regional instability will spread east to the Gulf. Rosalind Jordan, AlJazeera, Washington.
Let's talk some more about the impact of oil prices with Christophe Barrette, who's a global oil analyst at Crédit Agricole Corporate and Investment Bank and joins us from London. Welcome to Al Jazeera. Good to talk to you. So oil prices at their highest level in 2 years. What's your outlook over the short term?
Well, I think that at this stage we have to draw scenarios, and our outlook is based on a relatively optimistic scenario. What we assume is that Libya will resume production in the middle of April, and under this scenario what we will have is lower prices in the second quarter, because that would be the weakest quarter for demand in the year, and you will have additional supply from OPEC, and you will have additional supply from Libya. So basically what we have is prices returning to close to $85 per barrel from the second quarter of the year.
So you're quite optimistic that's considering Libya resumes production?
Yeah, actually, right now I think that there has not been damages to the oil installation, so there is no reason why, if the conflict in Libya ends relatively swiftly, there is no reason why Libya should not resume production. And then, whatever the issue of the conflict, any camp will have interest to increase oil production to get revenues from oil. So basically we have to distinguish between social unrest, between uprising and disruption to oil supply. I think that we can bet on a resumption on Libyan production at the end of April.
Okay, and if we see oil prices continuing to rise, looking at a global picture now, how much would that hurt the world economy?
Oh, that would be dramatic for the world economy. In fact, I think a simple way to look at that would be to look at the share of oil expenses in total GDP. Each time we had this share growing above 4%, which happened in the first oil shock, second oil shock, and in 2008, each time we have this share going above 4%, we have a significant impact on economic growth. If we put oil prices right now at around $110 per barrel for the rest of the quarter and for the second quarter, we would have the share of oil expenses in total GDP close to 6%, and that would be a weight that would be unsustainable for the world economy in times of very fragile economic recovery.
And at this point, Christophe, OPEC is not saying that it will boost its output. What do you think will happen with OPEC? Will we see them boosting their output at some point?
I think that OPEC is increasing production. I think that we don't need a meeting, we don't need formal declaration. What we have is a very strong indication that Saudi Arabia is increasing a lot of production. We have numbers as much as 9.4 million barrels per day, which is a 7 kbd increase compared to their previous level. So it's a strong increase. We have an increase in Kuwait production. We have an increase in the UAE production, for example, at the start of